What's up, Globetrotters? This is Erin and Steven, creators of Melanin Majority, your go-to hub for everything Black travel. Today, we have the privilege of being with Dayvee Sutton. She is a two-time Emmy Award-winning journalist, an experienced adventure traveler, and the founder of lifestyle website Daily Affair, the creator of Dream Network Media, and the host of new travel show Beyond the Usual. We are so excited to be here with you. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much for being with us, Dayvee. All right, so is there any more you want to give us on your background, and also maybe tell us a little bit about what we can expect on Beyond the Usual? We know it just hit Amazon and Apple and coming to DirecTV this summer.
Yes. So it's an experiential travel show. So it blends adventure and culture. It's a more immersive way on how you can travel. So, like, I know typically or historically it's been what I call a bit colonialistic, and then in the sense that we are eating our way through a country, like 5 ways you can, eat through Spain or whatever. And I feel like travel should be experienced, where you are taking in, what people are offering you, and looking people in the eyes and sharing meals with them, and sharing their cultures. It's culture sharing. And then also I'm a little bit of I wouldn't say adventure junkie, but I like trying things that are kind of crazy. So from a festival that happens every year to something that is on people's bucket list, I've tried to present things that are beyond the usual. And that's where the name comes from.
Very nice. Yeah. So your first job was as a sports reporter for CNN in London, and we just wanted to know, could you describe your journey and how you went from being there to now being the host of Beyond the Usual?
So actually my first job was in radio, but most of my background has been in sports as a sports broadcaster. And I did work for CNN and Turner Sports, and I did work for ESPN and NBC and CBS, a lot of places. I always say the easiest way to describe it is the places that I did not work for. But I work primarily in traditional broadcast journalism, and made a pivot in my career to kind of initially was to create content and provide it back to these major networks. But then when I was building the foundation of my business, I did a lot of study on what the industry was doing and how people were taking in content. So when I initially shot the pilot for Beyond the Usual, it was made for television, and we were talking to a couple of television networks. But I knew that this particular project, I felt like it was going to be a more inclusive or intimate experience. I wanted to take the viewer along with me. Instead of standing in front of the big castle and telling you about it, I wanted to say, come on, let's go inside and explore. And so I felt that the way that people are viewing this content is kind of on the go, so like on all of their screens. So you can certainly watch it on television because of the platforms that we're distributing it to, but you can also take it with you on your phone, on your laptop, how people are watching TV these days. And so created this kind of huge distribution network. And yes, it has initially launched on Amazon, and then it's going to go hit your Roku devices on 2 different channel apps in April. And then we have a deal coming through with DirecTV in the summer, but there are still other distributors that are pending that have not been announced yet. So we are going to meet you where you are, but it is definitely, it's a television show, but it's made for digital streaming. So the episodes aren't a half an hour; they're anywhere from 2.5 minutes to 8 minutes. So you can binge. You can binge on a destination, and I would love for you to binge.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's amazing. That's amazing. So, you said sports has always been a part of your background. And sports, is such a universal language. It applies, anywhere in the world. So how did you transition that into adventure travel? And, just being as though Black people traditionally aren't as well represented in adventure travel, what would you say to folks who, maybe aren't as adventurous but want to challenge themselves?
I feel like that when you're seeing it through me, I am a little sporty, but I always present myself as like I'm just a regular brown girl. And when I'm about to take that, I guess like if I'm going to rappel down a cliff or something, I am scared, but it's the fear is not going to a reason for me not to do it. So I like to present it in a way. I always say that my job is to inspire you to go. So there are certainly people that won't go. They'll just like to sit and watch you go. But then a lot of the early feedback that I got, and especially on my social media, is like, oh, I really want to try that, because I don't try to present myself as intangible. I try to present it as like, I'm like you, but I really am super curious about doing this. And if I can get past the fear of sharks in the ocean, then if I can push past it, what the feeling that I have being on the other side of it is going to be so much more rewarding than backing down because I was afraid.
Right. Yeah. That's a great lesson.
Yeah, and like conquer your fears, get out there.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we've noticed in the travel space how it's dominated typically by white male hosts. And so we were wondering, what challenges have you faced, being a brown girl, coming into this space and saying, you know what, I'm going to do it my way?
Well, that's also one of the reasons I wanted to get this out as soon as possible, even though it took 2 years to produce, is that just to bring we just need representation, right? Like, we know the numbers, but do they know the numbers that, Black Americans spend $50 billion a year in travel?
Right.
And it's not, I always pushed back on people saying the new Black travel movement, because we've always traveled. If you go back to the Green Book, if you even go back to ancient African people, we have traveled, but we just not have been represented. And so getting that, just kind of carving out the space and making sure that I had this initial project on wide distribution, hopefully will open the doors for others. And there are others, as we all know, like they're bubbling up, and I think Travel Channel is going to have a couple this spring, and then our friend Onika is doing her thing in Canada, and it's coming through, but it's not an anomaly, and it's not a new movement. And so I feel like the more of us, like what you guys are doing, is if we just keep saying like, oh yeah, we're here and we've been here. And if you kind of search adventure travel, you'll see me like on social media, but you'll see other people who have melanin, as you guys say, and in addition to just like Black Americans traveling, minorities across the board in this country are the heaviest travelers. That's more than business travel, that's more than leisure travel, and it's because minorities are going home and they're going to see their family or wherever they live. Even if it's domestically across the country. So, I mean, I feel like me being in the space, I love being in the space, but I also, it's not competitive to me in the sense that I don't want to be the only one in the space, because I'm not the only one in the space. You guys are doing it. I grew up doing it, so it's not a new movement, because my dad wouldn't have taken us across the country and everywhere we went if it was a new movement. So I feel like it's just, me being here is also myth busting, right?
Right. Exactly. So your show is full of exciting moments. I mean, just from what we've seen, you did so many incredible adventures. What would you say was your favorite moment of the season?
So I always get asked that question along with like my favorite country or favorite thing to do, and I will never answer that question because until I see the entire world or experience the most. But I've definitely had things that were most impactful. So my undergrad degree is in the study of world religions. So when I went to Israel, it was so fascinating. I think I spent 9 or 10 days there, but still did not have enough time to kind of soak up everything that I read over the years in real life form. And then I got to do some amazing things like rappel off a crater in the middle of the desert. And then just walking around Jerusalem and stuff like that. So I would say that was probably the most inspirational or impactful that really stayed with me, and came back with all of this insight. So I would probably pick that one.
Okay, nice.
And you've been to how many countries like have you actually been to first before I then
So I usually try to. I haven't really been to that many compared to other people who are like in the 50s and 60s and stuff. I've been to 20 countries, but I usually try to balance because our country has so much adventure and places to explore, and it's so beautiful and so different across the board. So I usually try to do 50-50. So one domestic trip and one international trip. So when we started the brand, we have like the hashtag passport Dayvee, and that I'm a passport stamp collector, and I certainly do love international trips, but I do love exploring this country too.
Right.
I mean, we have cliffs and valleys and mountains, and I mean, recently just came back from Lake Tahoe, and it was the most beautiful sight that I've ever seen. It was like snow-capped boulders on the crystal lake that was see-through. The ducks were playing. There was an inversion layer, and like I posted that, and it was like I can't even. And the photographer that was with me, I was like, I can't even believe what my eyes are seeing. Like, this is the most beautiful sight that I've ever seen, and it was right here in our country. So
that's incredible.
Yeah, like don't sleep on America, right?
Yeah, and it's so big. So there's like we have deserts, we have mountains, we have valleys, we have the oceans on both borders. So yeah.
Yeah. And with Melanin Majority, we try to focus on the international aspect because we just want to get people, conquering their fears and getting out there. But we're so glad that you do mention, this vast geography that we have in this country. But going with the international kind of spin to it, as a Black woman traveling, and solo travel is really picking up, where would you recommend someone who looks like you to, go and get out there?
Well, the thing is, people who look like us could go anywhere because we look like almost most of the world, except for, parts of Europe. But you can go to South America, and there's people that look like you. They'll just start speaking Spanish because they look like you. You can go to the Middle East, and they look like you. So I would say you can go. The world is your oyster, basically, because you have your melanin, and you can blend in quite easily. Just if you are in a conservative Muslim country, dress the way that they dress. If you have to wear a headscarf, you'll blend right in. You won't have any troubles. You don't have to be outwardly American and loud and, do it my way and stuff. I would say that's, when you're talking about the people's inhibitions of solo traveling, that's kind of maybe the first rule is like respect the country that you're going into. And that goes back to what I was speaking about, like the colonialistic way is like, oh, I'm bringing my Americanism to you instead of like, oh, I'm going to visit your space and see what your home has to offer. Like if you're visiting somebody's home, and what does your home have to offer, and taking that approach. So I know typically we see our people go straight to the Caribbean, and that's easy. But I would say if you had some inhibitions and you were trying to go somewhere big, maybe pick a country that speaks English first. So then at least that you can communicate. I mean, I remember going to Greece, which is a high tourism country, but it's Greek. It is literally Greek, and they have a different alphabet. and it was a little intimidating navigating like the public transportation, even though, most people speak English. But I would say that would probably be the first step, is start someplace big. Beyond the Caribbean, that speaks the language that you speak. And then when another solo travel tip I always say is like, you go ahead, buy your ticket and book your hotel. But you don't have to necessarily be alone when you book your excursions. There will be people on your excursions. So book tours and food tours and, history tours, and you'll at least have the guide with you, and you can share what you're feeling, and the photos and what you see and what you're taking in with the guide. And then when you eat, you could sit at the bar and then you can chat with the bartender. So you don't have to necessarily feel totally alone when you solo travel, but those are some tips to kind of get your feet wet.
Perfect.
Yeah, thanks so much.
That's great. So just transitioning out of travel for just a second, you've been behind so many inspirational pieces of work. We've looked at some of your other documentaries and things of that nature. Do you have any other projects coming out that we should be aware of that, people would be interested in?
Yeah, so we're still pushing and going on tour with my documentary project called What We Told Our Sons, 4 Families React to the Trayvon Martin Verdict. And I don't know if they've updated the site, but we have a few stops, and it's a half an hour documentary that I actually created to move the conversation forward in a different kind of approach for racism and systemic racism in our country. So it's a half an hour screening, and then we have a panel. But I have maybe 2 or 3 that have already started, but then this took over the travel project, so we're going to push that, and then I'll get back to my storytelling. When you talked about earlier about my background, mostly in sports, and then I hosted an entertainment and lifestyle show too, and then went back to sports. My whole drive as a journalist has always been storytelling, so it doesn't matter what I'm doing. So it can be sports, it can be entertainment, it can be hard news. I care about the stories and people's stories, and my approach, there is a little bit of a template with my approach in storytelling. It always starts with like the person. If you see like a documentary, or if you see a news story segment that I've produced, it's the human aspect and the story that I care about. And it even came down to if I was calling highlights in the sports anchor chair, I wouldn't necessarily care about the score, but if you told me like a basketball player who averaged 12 points a night suddenly scored 35, I'd care about that little story in between. Like, what was he doing that day to be inspired to score 35? And it might come out that, like his baby was born or something, and he had that little extra juice, or, whatever the case may be. So that's kind of a little bit of what drives me for storytelling. But yes, there are different other projects coming up in the works, and you can kind of keep your tabs on that through my production company's website or Facebook page, which is Dream Network Media.
Okay.
And perfect. Yeah, we were going to ask you, where can we find more of your projects? Hit us with the social media handles. But
yeah. So me personally, all my social is at Dayvee Sutton. And then my lifestyle website, The Daily Affair, is daily-affair. And I think on Twitter, it's daily_affair. But I think on Facebook, it's The Daily Affair. And then, so that's basically how you can find what's going on with me.
Great.